ever get stuck on a problem? I mean, really stuck. Like you start to feel kind of, stupid.
Yeah, like maybe you're just missing something fundamental. It's a weird feeling, right?
Definitely. We've all been there.
But what if I told you that feeling, that embrace of not knowing, could actually be the secret sauce to like groundbreaking scientific discovery?
Okay, now that's interesting.
It sounds kind of counterintuitive, but that's exactly what we're diving into today with this article you sent, The Importance of Stupidity in Scientific Research.
I'm intrigued already. Who's the author?
Our guide through this whole thing is the author himself, Martin A. Schwartz. He's a scientist, obviously, and clearly not afraid to ask the big questions, even if they're a little, awkward.
I like him already.
Right, so he jumps right in with this story about a friend of his, super brilliant scientist, who actually bailed on her PhD program because, get this, she said it made her feel stupid.
Wow.
Yeah, it's kind of a punch in the gut statement, isn't it? Especially considering, she was clearly at the top of her field.
It really makes you wonder what could make someone feel that way in such a, prestigious environment. You'd think it'd be the opposite.
Right. I mean, you'd think that'd be the place where you finally feel like you've got it all figured out.
Totally. Okay, so how does he explain that?
Well, that's what's so interesting about this whole stupidity thing.
I'm ready. Lay it on me. He calls it productive stupidity.
Productive stupidity.
Yeah, and it's not, about actually being stupid, right? It's more about, recognizing how much we don't know and being okay with that. Being willing to jump in even when you're not sure what you're doing.
Okay, I think I'm starting to get it, but how does that, actually work in practice?
Well, he talks about two kinds of stupidity. There's relative stupidity.
Yeah.
It's more like, feeling dumb because you didn't study for a test or something. But then there's absolute stupidity.
Absolute stupidity. Okay, now that sounds a little intimidating, maybe even a little scary.
Maybe. But it's kind of the heart of his argument, Absolute stupidity is about tackling those big fundamental questions where there are no easy answers. No textbooks, no experts. You're just out there on the edge of what's known.
So, instead of just learning the rules of a game, you're trying to invent a whole new one.
Exactly. And he says that PhD programs, as great as they are at teaching what we already know, they don't really prepare you for that feeling of, complete and utter unknowing.
Yeah, it'd be a real shock going from straight A's to suddenly feeling lost in the wilderness.
Totally. And Schwartz thinks that we need to shift the culture, especially in academia. We need to encourage those naive questions, embrace those moments of, wait, I have no idea what I'm doing. Make it okay to not have all the answers.
Because those are the moments when the real breakthroughs happen.
Exactly. And he's not just talking about, brand new scientists either. He says even the most seasoned researchers, himself included, are constantly hitting up against these profound unknowns.
So it's not about avoiding that feeling of stupidity. It's more like learning to be okay with it, even to embrace it.
Exactly. He actually says that feeling stupid in this productive way, it's a sign that you're on to something new, something exciting. You're pushing at the edges of what's possible, asking the questions nobody else is asking.
That's kind of a radical idea, isn't it? To see feeling stupid as a positive thing?
Totally. It's like reframing failure, right?
Right.
It's not the end, it's just part of the process. I love that he actually calls research muddling at one point.
Muddling? That's hilarious, but also kind of reassuring. It's okay to not have it all figured out.
Right, and I think that's part of what makes the article so great. He's not afraid to be a little self-deprecating, to admit that, hey, even he feels lost sometimes.
I think that makes him way more relatable, though. It's not about being a genius. It's about being willing to say, I don't know.
And that kind of vulnerability, admitting you don't have all the answers, that takes a certain amount of confidence, don't you think?
Absolutely. It's you have to believe in yourself enough to be okay with not knowing everything. Which kind of brings us back to his point about education, right? How do we build that kind of confidence in ourselves and in, future scientists, future thinkers?
That's the big question, right? He doesn't give us a step-by-step guide, but he does say that it starts with changing how we think about learning. Instead of just focusing on finding the right answers, what if we encouraged more, exploration, more risk-taking, even if it means making a few mistakes along the way?
It's like that saying, I have not failed, I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work.
Boom. There you go. Every mistake, every time you feel stupid, it's just a chance to learn something new, to get a little closer to the truth, whatever that might be.
It's not about being perfect, it's about being resilient, being able to pick yourself up and try again, even when it's hard.
Right. It's about having the guts to keep going, even when you feel like you have absolutely no clue what you're doing.
So how do we take this idea of productive stupidity beyond just like science and research?
Right.
Could it apply to like everyday life, to businesses, to relationships, to just navigating the world?
That's an interesting thought, right? I mean, what if we were all just a little more comfortable with not knowing?
That's a really good question. And it makes you think like, where else could this apply? Where do we get so caught up in needing to have the right answer that we miss out on the opportunity to discover something new, maybe even something amazing?
Like, it's not about always having the answer. It's more about, like, being open to the possibility that you might be wrong, you know?
Yeah.
That maybe there's a whole other way of looking at things.
Those can be kind of scary, right? I mean, nobody wants to feel like they don't know what they're doing.
Yeah, but what if that feeling of not knowing is actually the key to unlocking something amazing?
Okay, so then how do we actually do that? How do we get comfortable with that, like, productive stupidity?
Well, for starters, we can stop being so afraid to ask stupid questions. You know, the ones that seem obvious or maybe even a little embarrassing.
Because sometimes those are the questions that nobody else is asking.
Exactly. And they're often the ones that lead to the most interesting answers. It's like when you're a kid, you're constantly asking why, right? But somewhere along the way, we stop doing that. We start thinking we need to have all the answers.
Yeah, it's like we trade curiosity for, like, the appearance of knowing what we're talking about.
And that's a shame because real learning, real growth, that comes from embracing that don't know mind. You know, being okay with being a beginner again.
Which can be really humbling, right? I mean, especially if you're used to being the expert.
It is, but it's also incredibly liberating. you know? Because when you let go of the need to be right all the time, it frees you up to actually learn and grow, to discover things you never even imagined.
So for our listener out there who's like grappling with a tough problem or just feeling stuck, what advice would you give them? How can they start to embrace their own productive stupidity?
I'd say start by paying attention to those moments when you feel stuck or when you're tempted to just go with the easy answer. You know, those are the moments when you have a choice to make.
Yeah.
You can either cling to what you think you know, or you can get curious and start asking some stupid questions.
And maybe even be a little bit brave and admit that you don't have all the answers.
Exactly. Because in those moments of like intellectual humility, that's where the real magic happens. That's where the breakthroughs are hiding.
I love that. So to wrap things up, it seems like the real takeaway here is that sometimes the smartest thing we can do is admit that we don't know everything, to embrace those moments of productive stupidity and see where they lead us.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
So to our listeners, until next time, stay curious, stay open, and don't be afraid to ask those stupid questions. You never know what you might discover.